The emergency broadcast system of Ilara Vance's world was the crimson glow of a single, unblinking light on her console. It pulsed with the rhythm of a dying heart, each beat representing another $1 million hemorrhaging from her company, Vance Innovations. Her team of acclaimed engineers, men and women with pedigrees from the world's most prestigious institutions, stared at a cascade of failing code on the main screen, their faces pale masks of disbelief. Her chief technology officer, Marcus Thorne, a man who typically radiated an aura of arrogant certainty, looked as if he had just witnessed a ghost. "We have thrown every diagnostic at it," Marcus stammered, his voice thin. "It's not a hack. It's a paradox, a fundamental flaw in the Aegis system's core logic. It's like trying to fix a crack in the universe." Ilara stood behind them, a statue of controlled fury, her gaze fixed on the digital waterfall of failure. For 6 months, she had been pouring the company's resources into a ghost hunt, a frantic, $50 million search for a legendary coder known only by the pseudonym Deadless. He was the only one who could understand a system this complex, because whispers in the digital underground claimed he had architected the very language it was built upon before vanishing years ago. She had hired private investigators, offered staggering bounties on dark web forums, and chased down every dead-end lead from Silicon Valley to Zurich. He was a phantom, and her company was dying because of it. Later that night, the skyscraper was a hollowed-out shell, echoing with the silence of defeat. Ilara walked the desolate corridors of the executive floor, her heels clicking a sharp, lonely rhythm on the polished marble. She passed the janitor's cart parked discreetly by the panoramic windows. The man who pushed it, Samuel, was wiping down the glass, his movements methodical and serene. She barely registered his presence, her mind a storm of catastrophic projections. He was just part of the building's ambient machinery, as inanimate as the ficus plant in the corner. She did not know that she was walking past the only man on earth who could save her. She did not know she was ignoring the very ghost she was bankrupting her company to find. Samuel Reed, aged 52, believed in the quiet dignity of a job well done. Whether he was architecting a revolutionary operating system or ensuring a floor was free of streaks, the principle was the same: find the imperfections and make them right. His world now was one of ammonia and wax, of the gentle hum of the floor buffer after midnight, a stark contrast to the clatter of keyboards and the frantic energy of the tech world he had willingly left behind. His hands, once famous for their preternatural speed across a keyboard, were now calloused from wringing mops and gripping brooms. He lived in a small, meticulously clean 2-bedroom apartment in a part of the city the executives in the Vance Tower only saw from 30,000 feet. His life was defined not by stock options and launch parties, but by the steady rhythm of raising his teenage daughter, Lily. It was for her that he had walked away from it all. After his wife, an astrophysicist with a brilliant mind and a laugh that could fill a stadium, had succumbed to a long and brutal illness, the complex digital world Samuel had once built felt like hollow, meaningless cages. He had traded the pursuit of digital perfection for the tangible reality of packing his daughter's lunch, helping her with her math homework, and ensuring she had a father who was present in body and spirit. He did not need a fortune, he needed time, and that was something his old life had never been willing to give. His past was a carefully guarded secret. No one at the building knew that the quiet janitor who always had a kind word for the security guards was the man the industry had mythologized as Deadless. He was the architect of the open-source Chronos framework, the very foundation upon which giants like Vance Innovations had built their empires. He had released it into the world for free, a testament to his belief that knowledge should be a current, not a reservoir. Then, he had simply disappeared, leaving behind a legend and an unfillable void. Ilara Vance, aged 41, believed in a world that was quantifiable, predictable, and controllable. She lived in a sterile, glass-walled penthouse that overlooked the city, a fortress of solitude designed to keep the messiness of human connection at bay. Her success was a monument to her relentless drive, built on the ashes of a devastating betrayal years earlier when her first business partner had stolen her code and left her with nothing. That experience had forged her into a creature of pure logic and deep-seated suspicion. She trusted credentials, data, and contracts. She did not trust people. Her company, Vance Innovations, was her life's work, a testament to her ability to rebuild and dominate. The Aegis system was her crowning achievement, a revolutionary logistics platform that managed global shipping lanes with unprecedented efficiency. It was also her greatest vulnerability, a system so complex that only a handful of people on the planet truly understood its foundational mechanics. Now, that very complexity was strangling it from the inside out, and the crisis was dredging up all her old fears of failure and betrayal. Everyone was a potential threat, every anomaly a sign of sabotage. She saw the world through a lens of suspicion, and her gaze often fell on those who occupied the lowest rungs of her corporate ladder. The first collision was born of that suspicion. It was 2 a.m, and Alara was pacing her office when she noticed a light on in the primary strategy room down the hall. Peering through the glass, she saw Samuel Reed. He was not cleaning. He was standing before the massive whiteboard, marker in hand, staring intently at the complex algorithmic flowchart her team had left up, a diagram detailing a key component of the Aegis system. He was not looking at it with the vacant curiosity of a layman. His brow was furrowed in concentration, his head tilted as if listening to a conversation she could not hear. A cold spike of paranoia shot through her. Industrial espionage. It had to be. A rival corporation had planted a spy, disguised as a janitor, to steal their secrets. It was exactly the kind of move she would have made. She stormed into the room, her voice like cracking ice. "What do you think you're doing?" Samuel turned, startled. He held the marker up slightly, as if in surrender. "I am sorry, Miss Vance. I was just looking. There is an inefficiency in the data relay loop." He pointed a weathered finger at a specific junction in the diagram. "It creates a recursive echo under heavy load. It's elegant, but it is not stable." Alara stared at him, then at the board. His words were precise, technical. It was impossible. She let out a short, incredulous laugh. She buzzed her head of security and her CTO, Marcus, who was still in the building. When Marcus arrived, he took one look at the janitor presuming to critique his team's work and smirked. "An inefficiency? Is that what you call it?" Marcus said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Please, enlighten us. I'm sure the boys at MIT would be fascinated by your janitorial insights." Samuel's face remained placid, but a flicker of old fire stirred in his eyes. He said nothing more, simply capped the marker and placed it back on the tray. He understood this language well, the casual dismissal, the sneering superiority of those who equated a man's worth with his job title. He had heard it all before. "Get him out of here," Alara commanded the security guard who had just arrived. "And I want his locker searched and his access pass permanently revoked." "He's fired." As the guard led a silent Samuel away, Marcus chuckled. "A janitor trying to tell us how to code. You can't make this stuff up." But Alara wasn't laughing. The man's words echoed in her head. A recursive echo under heavy load. It was a strangely specific, eerily prescient observation. The doubt, a tiny, unwelcome seed, had been planted. The seed grew into a thorny vine of intrigue over the next few days. Alara could not shake the image of Samuel's quiet confidence, the certainty in his eyes. It gnawed at her. Against all logic, she found herself pulling the security footage from that night. She watched him for an hour. He did not take pictures. He did not write anything down. He just looked. And thought. Then, on a hunch, she pulled his employee file. Samuel Reed. Former employment, self-employed, address in a working-class neighborhood. No credentials, no college degree listed, nothing. He was a ghost long before he had started working for her. Driven by a compulsion she could not name, she did something she had not done in 20 years. She decided to conduct her own surveillance. That evening, she traded her tailored suit for jeans and a baseball cap, driving her sleek, anonymous sedan to the address from his file. She parked across the street from his modest apartment building, feeling ridiculous but unable to turn back. She watched him emerge an hour later with a young girl she assumed was his daughter. They did not go to a park or a movie. They walked several blocks to a dilapidated building with a faded sign, Northwood Community Youth Center. Elara followed, her heart pounding with a strange mix of suspicion and curiosity. She crept to a side window, peering through the grimy glass into a brightly lit room. What she saw made the air catch in her throat. Samuel was not a spy. He was a teacher. He stood in front of a dozen teenagers from the neighborhood, all huddled around aging computers. On a large projector screen was a complex string of code, a language so sophisticated it made her own team's work look like child's play. It was the Chronos framework. Not a copy, but the raw, foundational architecture. Samuel was explaining it with a simple, profound clarity she had never witnessed. He was not just teaching them to code, he was teaching them to think, to see the hidden poetry in the logic, the inherent beauty in a perfectly structured system. He moved between the students, his calloused hands guiding their smaller ones on the keyboards, his voice patient and encouraging. She saw a young boy solve a difficult problem, and Samuel's face lit up with a smile of pure, unadulterated pride. It was a warmth that her own success had never brought her. In that moment, watching him give away world-class knowledge for free in a rundown community center, she did not see a janitor. She saw a genius. A profound, inexplicable genius. Shaken, she returned to her car and made a call to the best private investigator her money could buy. "I have a name," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Samuel Reed. I want to know everything. I don't care what it costs." The report came back 48 hours later. It was a single, explosive page. Samuel Reed was deadless. The investigator had unearthed his digital footprints, old forum posts, encrypted correspondence with other legendary coders from a decade ago. It detailed his creation of the Chronos framework, his marriage to Dr. Elena Reed, her tragic death, and his subsequent, complete disappearance from the tech world. He had not been hiding from the world, he had simply been choosing a different one. The $50 million phantom she had been chasing across the globe had been cleaning her office toilets for the last 3 years. The irony was so immense, so staggering, it left her breathless. The revelation came just as the world was collapsing. The recursive echo Samuel had warned her about proved to be the system's Achilles heel. A rival company, exploiting the flaw, had triggered a cascading failure within the Aegis platform. It was not a hack they could patch, it was a conceptual error woven into its very DNA. The system was devouring itself. Global shipping lines were in chaos. Container ships were being rerouted to the wrong continents. The stock price of Vance Innovations was in freefall. They were 48 hours from insolvency. Her team was broken. Marcus Thorne, the embodiment of pedigreed expertise, slumped in his chair, defeated. "It's over, Elara," he whispered. "The architecture is fundamentally unsound. To fix it, you'd have to be the person who designed the language it's based on. You'd have to be a god." Elara looked at her dying company, at the faces of the thousands of employees whose livelihoods depended on her. Her pride, her cynicism, her entire worldview, crumbled into dust. There was only one option left. She had to swallow her pride and beg for help from the man she had humiliated and fired. She found him not at the community center, but at his small apartment. When he opened the door, he showed no surprise, only a quiet, weary resignation. His daughter, Lily, peeked out from behind him, her eyes wide with curiosity. The apartment was simple but filled with a warmth Elara's penthouse had never known. Books on astrophysics were stacked next to programming manuals. A handmade card on the fridge read, "World's Best Dad." "Mr. Reed," Elara began, her voice cracking with a humility she had never known. Samuel. I was wrong. I was arrogant, and I was blind. My company is collapsing. The Aegis system, it's the Echo. The one you warned me about. We can't fix it. Her confession hung in the air, stripped of all her usual power and authority. I am not here to offer you a job. I am here to ask you to save us. Samuel looked at her, his gaze penetrating. He was not looking at a CEO, but at a person stripped bare by desperation. He thought of the people who would lose their jobs, the families that would be affected. He thought of the flawed beauty of the system he had seen on the whiteboard, a magnificent structure built on his own foundation, now teetering on the brink. He nodded, once. I will help. When Samuel Reed walked back into the headquarters of Vance Innovations, it was not as a janitor, but as a legend resurrected. The engineers, including a shell-shocked Marcus, stared as Alara personally escorted him to the main console. There was a murmur of disbelief and derision. This is the guy, one of the lead programmers whispered to Marcus. The janitor? Samuel ignored them. He did not sit at the gleaming ergonomic workstation. Instead, he pulled up a simple stool and opened a raw command line interface, a black screen with a blinking green cursor that most of the younger engineers had never even used. His fingers, which had grown accustomed to the handle of a mop, found the keyboard as if returning home. They began to fly. There was no frantic searching, no confused diagnostics. He moved through the code's architecture with the innate familiarity of a man walking through the house he had built. He saw not lines of text but a living, breathing entity. He found the flaw in minutes, the conceptual paradox that had eluded 100 of the world's best minds. You were all trying to patch the crack, he said, his voice calm and steady, addressing the room without turning around. But the problem isn't the crack. It's the foundation. You built a skyscraper on a fault line, he explained the recursive echo, not with complex jargon, but with a simple analogy of a whisper in a circular room that grows into a deafening roar. For the first time, they all understood. For the next 3 hours, he did not patch. He rebuilt. From memory, he rewrote entire sections of the core logic, his fingers a blur. He restructured the data relays, simplified the recursive loops, and strengthened the foundational architecture. It was not repair, it was an act of creation. The cascading red alerts on the main screen flickered, one by one, and turned green. The system stabilized. The hemorrhaging stopped. Silence descended upon the room. The engineers stared, their mouths agape. Marcus Thorne looked as if he had just witnessed a miracle. Samuel Reed, the man he had mocked, had just single-handedly saved all of them. He had done in 3 hours what they had failed to do in 3 weeks. He had not just fixed the code, he had made it better, faster, more stable than it had ever been. The next morning, Alara Vance called an all-hands meeting in the company's grand atrium. She stood on the stage, not in her usual power suit, but in a simple dress. Samuel stood beside her, clad in his unassuming work clothes. Yesterday, Vance Innovations was on the verge of total collapse, she began, her voice resonating with a newfound sincerity. We were saved. But not by our high-priced consultants or our world-renowned engineers. We were saved by this man, she turned to Samuel. This is Samuel Reed. For the last 3 years, he has been our night shift janitor. What I failed to see, what we all failed to see, is that he is also the man known as Deadless. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. She proceeded to tell them his story, his brilliant past, his personal tragedy, and the quiet, humble life he had chosen. She publicly apologized to him for her blindness, for her arrogance, and for the humiliating way he had been dismissed. He saw the flaw in our system weeks ago, she concluded, her voice thick with emotion. He tried to warn us, and we scoffed at him. We judged a man's intellect by the uniform he wore. Let this be a lesson to all of us. Brilliance is not found in a resume, but in a mind. And integrity is not found in a title, but in a heart. Mr. Reed saved this company, and in doing so, he has given us a chance to become a better 1 inch. The atrium erupted in a thunderous, sustained applause. It was not just for the man who saved their jobs, but for the profound lesson he represented. Marcus Thorne was at the front, clapping the loudest, his face a mixture of shame and genuine admiration. Later, in her office, Elara slid a contract across the desk to Samuel. It offered him the position of Chief Technology Officer, a 7-figure salary, and an obscene amount of stock options. "It's yours," she said. "Anything you want." Samuel looked at the contract, then pushed it gently back across the desk. "Thank you, Elara. But I can't go back to that life. My daughter needs me. Those kids at the center need me." He paused, a new idea taking shape in his eyes. "But I have a counter-proposal. Your company has resources. I have knowledge. There are thousands of brilliant minds out there, trapped in neighborhoods like mine, who will never get a chance to even sit in a room like this. Let's give them that chance." He outlined his vision, the Deadless Initiative. A new, independent division of Vance Innovations, a non-profit foundation dedicated to finding and nurturing raw talent in underserved communities. It would build state-of-the-art learning centers, provide scholarships, and create a pipeline for a new generation of innovators who would otherwise be overlooked. He would run it. Elara stared at him, a slow smile spreading across her face. He had saved her company only to ask that she use its power to help others. He was offering her not just a business plan, but a path to redemption. "Yes," she said, without a moment's hesitation. "Absolutely, yes." The Deadless Initiative became the new soul of Vance Innovations. The first center opened in Samuel's own neighborhood, a gleaming beacon of hope where the old community center once stood. Elara and Samuel cut the ribbon together, not as CEO and employee, but as partners. His daughter Lily stood beside him, her face beaming with pride. Marcus Thorne became one of the initiative's most dedicated volunteer mentors, finding more satisfaction in teaching a teenager to write her first line of code than he ever had in a boardroom. Over the next few years, their partnership flourished. Elara's sharp business acumen and vast resources, combined with Samuel's visionary genius and profound humanity, created an unstoppable force for good. They opened a dozen centers across the country, discovering brilliant young minds who went on to create technologies that solved real-world problems. The company, once a cold monument to profit, became a symbol of purpose-driven innovation. One evening, Elara and Samuel stood on the rooftop of their newest center, watching the city lights flicker to life below. The air was cool, and a comfortable silence settled between them. "You know," Elara said softly, "I spent $50 million looking for you. I thought I was searching for a key to save my company." Samuel smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "And what did you find?" "I found," she replied, turning to him, her eyes filled with a warmth he had never seen in her before, "that the most valuable things aren't the ones you search for, but the ones you were too blind to see right in front of you all along." They stood together, two worlds collided and remade, watching the future they were building, one quiet, brilliant light at a time. The real echo was not a flaw in a system, but the powerful, reverberating truth that the measure of a person's worth is never their station in life, but the quiet brilliance they use to lift up the world around them.